Imagine, for just a second, being Barack Obama's very first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Right.
You are embedded in the canvassing, you're doing grassroots organizing, and basically running the standard progressive political playbook.
The classic Democratic ground game.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine taking that exact same identity, that very specific, very modern political credential, and using it over the next, 20 years to publish dozens of books and thousands of blog posts prophesying an inevitable, apocalyptic end of the world war in Iran.
Yeah.
And oversaw, strangely enough, by the moral authority of the Pope.
It is a massive intellectual whiplash. I mean,
Right.
you are looking at a digital landscape where conventional American political organizing just directly, violently collides with ancient cataclysmic theology.
Welcome to another deep dive. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because, honestly, we are stepping into one of the most bizarre, sprawling, and frankly fascinating digital archives on the entire
I mean,
internet.
absolutely. It's unlike almost anything else out there.
We are exploring a blog titled Barackface, and it's written by an author named Paramendra Kumar Bhagat.
Right.
And to grasp the sheer scale of what we are dealing with today, you really have to understand that this is not just, a handful of opinion pieces or a couple of hot takes.
No, not at all.
This is a 20-year digital footprint. It contains over 4.8 million page views. We are talking about thousands upon thousands of posts stretching all the way back to 2004.
And that's not even counting the bibliography.
Exactly. An immense bibliography of self-published books covering just everything, from quantum computing to religious prophecy to literally global sales tactics.
Yeah, but before we go any further into this, we really need to establish a very firm, non-negotiable boundary for this discussion.
Absolutely clear.
Because the primary source we are anchoring today's analysis on is a specific post from this archive. It's dated April 18th, 2026, and it's titled, "The Pope's Compassion for the People of Iran." And this post, along with the author's broader structural framework, it contains highly charged political rhetoric and extreme, very polarizing religious viewpoints.
Yes, it really does.
The author makes explicit foundational attacks on the legitimacy of Islam, and they frame global events through a highly controversial apocalyptic lens.
And to be absolutely clear to you listening, our mission today is strictly analytical.
Strictly analytical.
We're not here to endorse, validate, or, take sides on any of the author's claims regarding Islam, the Pope, global conflicts, or the Middle East. Not at all.
No, we are acting entirely as neutral observers here.
Exactly. Our goal is just to deconstruct the mechanics of this individual's worldview. We want to understand the exact architecture of how a highly prolific creator synthesizes breaking global news, ancient religious scripture, and modern technology into this deeply idiosyncratic personal reality.
We are basically mapping the echo chamber from the inside out.
That is a perfect way to put it. So here's our roadmap for today.
Let's hear it.
We'll begin with that specific April 2026 post about the Pope and a referenced 2026 Iran war.
Right.
Then we will dissect the extreme theological framework, what the author actually calls spiritual clarity, that they use to justify their geopolitical stance.
Which is where things get really intense.
Oh, yeah. And from there, we are going to zoom out into the author's wider universe. We'll analyze how their ancient prophecies sit literally right next to their books on artificial intelligence and startup capitalization.
Just to see how one single mind manages to hold all of this together.
Exactly. So let's start right at the anchor point.
Right.
The blog is called Barackface, and right at the top, the author prominently displays that credential we talked about. I was Barack Obama's first full-time volunteer in New York City.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why do you think that specific credential remains the anchor?
Right. Because it's so weird. You have an author writing about the Middle East, the end of the current historical age, and ancient gods. But the sign above the door is essentially, I handed out flyers for a 21st century Democratic campaign.
Yeah, it seems totally disconnected. But it actually provides a sheen of modern, secular legitimacy.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. When someone tells you they were a political volunteer, it signals a belief in human agency, right?
Okay, yeah.
It suggests they understand policy, diplomacy, grassroots mobilization. By putting that at the forefront, they're establishing themselves as a rational actor within the standard democratic process.
Huh. But the moment you read the April 18th, 2026 post, that rational secular framework just completely vanishes.
It evaporates. What's fascinating here is the sheer speed of that pivot.
Yeah, because the backdrop of the post is a kinetic conflict the author refers to as the 2026 Iran War.
Right.
And right out of the gate, the author demands that we stop looking at this war through standard political punditry. They literally argue that the Pope's stance on this war shouldn't be viewed through what they call a tiny binary of political discourse.
And they specifically point a finger at the Iranian diaspora in this post.
Yeah, they do.
They argue that the war wasn't the only option, and they complain that not everything possible had been done before military action was taken. And they place significant blame on the diaspora for being, quote, missing in action.
Which ironically feels like the grassroots organizer talking.
Oh, completely.
That's the Obama volunteer saying, you didn't lobby hard enough, you didn't mobilize the community.
Right. It's a very boots-on-the-ground critique.
But then, and this is where I get completely lost in their logic, the author pivots to the Pope.
Yes. The sudden shift to Rome.
Right. If you were writing about a complex, modern conflict in the Middle East, what is the narrative strategy of using the head of the Catholic Church as the ultimate arbiter of compassion? I mean, why does the Pope become the moral anchor for a war in Iran?
Because secular diplomacy, the United Nations, statecraft, economic sanctions, it doesn't offer the absolute moral certainty the author requires for the argument they are about to make.
It's not grand enough.
Exactly. The author applauds the Pope, stating that his compassion for the people of Iran is not misplaced. By invoking the Pope, the author is signaling to the reader that we are no longer operating in the realm of geopolitics.
We're zooming way out.
Right. We're operating in the realm of cosmic morality. The Pope is used as a moral shield.
Okay, but a shield for what exactly?
A shield for redefining entire global populations.
Wow.
To understand why the Pope is relevant to the author's view of Iran, we have to look at a concept the author introduces called spiritual clarity.
Right, the spiritual clarity thing.
And I will reiterate to our listeners right now, we are stepping into the author's deeply hostile theological claims here just to understand their internal logic.
Yes, please keep that in mind as we go through this. We are just reporting what's in the text.
So the author introduces a framework that explicitly attacks Islam.
Yeah, very explicitly.
They call it the anti-religion and the religion of the devil.
Which is just, that is a wildly extreme baseline to start from.
It is. They build a theological argument that Allah is not God, but rather a distortion created by the devil. They claim that Allah, as described in the Quran, completely lacks the power to enter human history.
And they go even further to attack the historical foundation of the faith itself, right?
Yes. Claiming, quote, there is no historical Muhammad.
Which, again, we are not endorsing. This is just their stated viewpoint.
Exactly. The author's logic relies on a very functional, almost mechanical definition of religious figures. They write, runners run, swimmers swim, prophets prophecy.
And they hold up the biblical figure of Isaiah as the ultimate metric for this.
Right. They claim Isaiah's prophecies are still actively coming true today.
But then they assert that no prophecies are attributed to Muhammad, and therefore, in their mind, that invalidates the entire religion.
Yes. They are attempting to systematically strip a major world religion of its historical legitimacy, its prophetic validity, and its divine agency.
Here's where it gets really interesting, stylistically speaking.
Well, the phrasing.
Yes. Because while they are dealing with these massive cosmic concepts, like God, the devil, ancient prophets, and global war, the author uses a phrase that completely, and I mean completely, breaks the tone.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say.
They write, the devil has managed to sell the Muslims the Brooklyn Bridge.
It is a remarkable stylistic collision.
It's so jarring.
Yeah.
You are writing what amounts to an apocalyptic manifesto, redefining the spiritual fate of billions of people, and you just drop a 20th century New York street hustle idiom into the middle of it?
Right.
Why do that? It feels so wildly out of place.
Well, it tells us a lot about the environment in which this text was created.
What do you mean?
In traditional publishing, an editor would flag that immediately. They would circle it in red and say, you are writing about eschatology. You cannot use a colloquialism about a New York real estate con.
Yeah, the tone is completely disjointed.
But this is a self-published, unfiltered digital archive. There is zero editorial friction.
None at all.
So the author is processing ancient theology directly through the lens of a New Yorker. It demystifies the cosmic evil they are trying to portray, reducing a massive, complex theological difference to a literal street con job.
Okay, I want to propose a way to think about how the author structures this entire argument, because it helped me wrap my head around it.
Sure, go for it.
Think of it like a massive spiritual sorting algorithm.
Oh, I like that.
In computer science, an algorithm takes a huge data set, runs it through a specific set of binary rules, and outputs a new categorization.
Right.
The author is essentially taking global populations and running them through this internal software to make them fit into a very specific rigid worldview of good versus evil.
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, because the author constructs it as a very rigid syllogism. Let's break down the exact logic of that algorithm.
Okay, let's do it.
Premise A of their algorithm is that Islam is not a religion, but a vast deception.
Right.
They define Muslims as human beings who have been, quote, led astray by the devil. That is the first data filter.
Okay, so a massive global population has now been recategorized as victims of a deception.
Precisely. Then we move to premise B, which is the author's definition of the Pope's job description.
And what is that, according to them?
The author states that the Pope has spent a lifetime separating sin from sinners.
Oh, okay, I see where this is going.
Which leads directly to the output of the algorithm, the conclusion.
The conclusion is that because this massive population are simply victims of a cosmic con job, the Brooklyn Bridge hustle, they fall squarely into the Pope's domain.
Exactly. The Pope's compassion for the people of Iran is correct, because he is pitying the victims of the devil, not endorsing their faith.
That is a staggering mental gymnast routine.
It really is.
By stripping an entire global religion of its agency, the author solves their own moral dilemma regarding the 2026 Iran war.
Yes, it creates a very convenient loophole.
They build a framework where they can support the geopolitical outcomes of a devastating war, because the system is evil, while still claiming the moral high ground of compassion for the people, because, well, the people are just victims.
It allows the author to mourn the casualties while cheering the disruption of the infrastructure.
Man, that is dark.
It is. But this algorithm needs a foundation to justify the violence of the war itself. Modern political theory isn't enough to justify the level of destruction the author anticipates.
Right, you can't just use standard UN resolutions to justify apocalyptic destruction.
So they reach back into ancient texts.
And they don't just reach into one tradition. This is where the synthesis gets incredibly dense, almost overwhelming.
It really does.
The author brings in texts from vastly different historical and religious traditions. They specifically pull from the Hindu epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and smash them together with the Judeo-Christian book of Isaiah.
The author uses the Hindu epics to establish a terrifying baseline. They state, "The truly evil do not reason." According to the author's reading of the Mahabharata, the forces of evil will always fight to the finish.
And this sets up their core prophecy for modern geopolitics, right? They write, quote, "The last two ages ended with a war, as will this one."
We really have to unpack the mechanics of that theology because it explains the author's justification for extreme violence.
Okay, break it down for us.
In Hindu cosmology, time is cyclical. It's not a straight line. It moves through vast ages, or yugas.
The different eras.
Exactly. The current age, the Kali Yuga, is characterized by darkness and moral decline, and it must end in a cataclysmic destruction before the cycle can restart.
So it's a hard reset.
Yes. The author is using the cyclical, deterministic view of time to argue that a final, violent clash is completely unavoidable. It's baked into the universe.
So if the evil forces cannot be reasoned with, and the age is divinely scheduled to end in war anyway, what is the role of the good forces in this scenario?
According to the author, the forces of good must attain spiritual clarity, which we know, in their framework, means rejecting Islam and then use overwhelming force when war becomes inevitable.
Overwhelming force.
Yes. The author argues that extreme violence is actually the tool for peace.
How does that make any sense?
Because in their mind, it minimizes long-term death by ending the conflict decisively once and for all.
Overwhelming force to minimize death. It is the ultimate paradox. You literally have to destroy the world to save it.
It's a very grim logic.
But how does the book of Isaiah fit into this? Because Isaiah is a Judeo-Christian text, and that tradition is usually linear, not cyclical, right?
This is where the author creates a custom-built hybrid theological engine.
A hybrid engine. I like that.
Hindu time is cyclical. The wheel keeps turning, meaning war will eventually return again and again. But the author grafts the linear Judeo-Christian promise of Isaiah right onto the end of the Hindu cycle.
Oh, wow.
The book of Isaiah vividly describes a future where swords are beaten into plowshares, a linear endpoint where there are, quote, no more wars.
So they use the Mahabharata to justify the bloody, unavoidable necessity of a final war today. But they use the Bible to promise a utopian, peaceful aftermath tomorrow.
Exactly. It's a pick-and-choose theology to support a specific geopolitical outcome. And they ground this cosmic war in the specific geography of Iran by making very stark historical claims.
Right.
The author asks, how did Islam enter Iran, become Muslim, or die? They claim it stays there through utter tyranny.
So in the author's framework, the current political regime in Iran isn't just a government you negotiate with.
No, it is the continuation of a demonic occupation that must be cleansed to end the historical age.
I have to stop and push back on the author's logic here because it feels like a massive, glaring contradiction.
Oh, definitely. What's catching your eye?
We just established that the author believes that truly evil do not reason and that this age must end in a prophesied inevitable war.
Yes, that's their baseline.
If that is true, if it's cosmically inevitable, how can they simultaneously complain in the exact same blog post that not everything possible has been done before the war option was taken?
Right, the complaint about the diaspora.
Yes, how can they blame the Iranian diaspora for failing to lobby and organize? You cannot angrily advocate for diplomatic exhaustion and human political organizing while simultaneously prophesying that a war is a cosmic inevitability.
It doesn't track.
If the war is divinely scheduled by the universe to end the age, what difference does a diaspora lobbying group in New York make?
You've hit on the central cognitive dissonance of the entire archive. This is exactly it.
It's maddening.
You have Paramendra, the grassroots political organizer, constantly fighting with Paramendra, the apocalyptic prophet.
Yes.
One believes in human agency, statecraft, policy, and petitions. The other believes the enemy literally cannot be reasoned with, and the end times are a fixed point in history.
It's like they're playing chess against themselves, but one board is in a local community center in New York, and the other board is floating out in the cosmos.
That's exactly what it is.
How does a single individual sustain such a massive, all-encompassing, and deeply contradictory theory of the world? I mean, your brain would just melt.
To understand that, we have to look past this single blog post. The post is really just a symptom of a much, much larger ecosystem.
Right.
We have to look at the author's broader bibliography.
Oh, the books. Yes.
Yeah.
When you look at the list of published books linked in the source material, it is an absolute avalanche of text.
It's staggering.
If you thought blending the Pope, the Mahabharata, and Isaiah was intense, the bibliography takes it to an entirely different, almost surreal level.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the bibliography reveals a mind that is relentlessly trying to synthesize every single facet of human existence into one unified theory.
Let's look at the religious and prophetic books first, just to set the stage. Okay. We have titles like Calcism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance. We have The Last Age, Lord Kalki, Prophecy, and the Final War for Peace, and Prophecies are Proof of God.
The term Kalkism is the key to unlocking this entire section.
What exactly is Kalkism?
In traditional Hinduism, Kalki is the 10th and final avatar of the god Vishnu.
Okay.
Kalki is prophesied to appear at the very end of the Kali Yuga, which, remember, is our current age of darkness, riding a white horse with a blazing sword to destroy filth and usher in a new golden age.
Which perfectly aligns with the blog post about using overwhelming force to end the age in war.
Exactly. The author has essentially built a modern political philosophy around the avatar of destruction.
But look at the subtitle of that first book you mentioned. The Economic and Spiritual Blueprint for an Age of Abundance.
Right.
They are merging the ultimate divine destroyer of darkness with macroeconomics.
Yes, they are. And they take it further into the realm of speculative fiction. They have a whole series of sci-fi and narrative books, too.
Oh, yeah. Titles like Around the World in 1,000 Days, The Country of Geniuses, A Race Through AI Adolescence.
Very tech-focused.
And then The Great Subcontinent Uprising and Trump's Default, The Mist of Empire.
They are using fiction to wargame global political scenarios.
But here is the absolute whiplash. This is the part that just broke my brain.
The business books.
Yes. Interspersed between the ancient prophecies, the economic blueprints, and the geopolitical sci-fi are hyper-practical, completely mundane tech and business workbooks.
We really need to list these out to appreciate the sheer scope of this whiplash.
Okay, so we have Precigenetics, Unicorn to Solara, Marketing Escape Velocity.
Normal startup stuff.
Right. Then we have Agentic AI, set to explode in 2026. And then, incredibly, we have Side Hustles that work in 2025 and 30 Ways to Close Sales.
I want to pause on Agentic AI for a second because it is crucial context for where we are heading later.
Okay, yeah. What is Agentic AI?
Agentic AI isn't just a language model that answers a prompt, like a standard chatbot. It is an artificial intelligence designed with agency.
Meaning it can do things on its own.
Yes, you give it a high-level goal, and it can autonomously browse the internet, execute software, send emails, and take independent actions to achieve that goal without any human supervision.
That is wild.
And the author is writing about the bleeding edge of this autonomous technology right alongside the literal end of the world.
I just try to imagine the daily routine of a mind that operates like this.
Yeah.
You know,
It's hard to picture.
how do you seamlessly pivot from prophesying the violent, world-ending final war of humanity in the morning to writing a step-by-step workbook on 30 ways to close sales in the afternoon?
It takes a unique kind of energy.
Does the presence of a sales manual undermine the gravity of their apocalyptic prophecies? I mean, how serious can the apocalypse be if you're worried about your sales funnel?
Or does it just show that even in the last age, people still have a mortgage to pay?
Ah, true.
It grounds this extreme eccentricity in a very modern, almost tragic necessity. You can be the self-proclaimed prophet of Kalkism, but you still need to pay the electric bill. It reveals a profound psychological desire for control across every spectrum of life. The author doesn't just want to understand the spiritual end of the world, they want to master the startup capitalization tables that will fund the companies operating during the end of the world.
I look at this bibliography, and my brain immediately goes to a machine learning analogy.
Let's hear it.
It looks exactly like an AI language model that has been fed the entire unfiltered internet. You know, religious eschatology, sales funnels, Hyperloop schematics, South Asian geopolitics, and American progressive news. And somebody just hit enter and asked it to generate a unified theory of everything.
That is a brilliant analogy. And that frantic, all-encompassing energy that need to document, synthesize, and monetize every stray thought, it isn't just restricted to their books.
No, it's everywhere.
If we want to see how this mind operates in real time, we have to look at their daily blogging habits.
Let's talk about the data fire hose, because the archival data for the Barackface blog is staggering.
Staggering is the right word.
In the year 2025 alone, the author published 1,333 posts,
Let that sink in.
and over 600 posts in 2016. This is consistent, massive output stretching back 2 decades.
We are talking about an average of nearly 4 posts a day, every single day, including weekends and holidays, for a year.
And if we zoom in on the specific cluster of posts surrounding our primary article in April 2026, the author published 79 posts in roughly 18 days.
The volume is just immense.
The titles alone map out an unfiltered stream of consciousness.
What are some of the adjacent posts from that April cluster?
Well, amidst all the heavy, prophetic posts about the 2026 Iran war, we have an incredibly eclectic mix. For example, we have a post titled, "Did the CIA kill scientist Papa?"
Okay, historical conspiracy.
Right next to it, literally adjacent, "Elon Musk is Shah Rukh Khan. How?"
Just casually merging an American tech billionaire with a Bollywood superstar.
Yep. Then a post simply titled, "Fucking Reza."
A bit of personal grievance there.
Deeply personal. Then deep, wonky policy titles like, "When Water Becomes Steam," "AI, Abundance, and a Pra." It cuts off. And Tucker, this is stupid.
It's all over the map.
But there is also a very strange structural quirk in this April 2026 cluster. Many of the posts are simply labeled with numbers and country or personal names,
Right.
like 19 Ram, or 14 Hungary, 11 Pakistan, 2 Supreme Court.
It reads like a personal Dewey Decimal System for global chaos.
Yes. What is the mechanism behind that? Is it a ranking? Is it a countdown to the apocalypse?
Well, here's the thing. When a human being maintains a level of output, that high 79 posts in 18 days, they are no longer writing in the traditional sense.
What do you mean?
They are externally processing their reality. The blog isn't a polished publication intended for an audience. It is the raw, unedited telemetry data of the author's brain.
Oh, wow. Like an open diary of their synapses firing.
Exactly. They're taking massive, disparate inputs, the Iran war, South African politics with Julius Malema, Elon Musk's tweets, the concept of democracy tech, and forcefully cramming them into their internal spiritual sorting algorithm.
And because it's a personal blog, there is no editor to say, hey, your numbering system makes no sense, or you can't jump from the CIA to Bollywood in the same hour.
Exactly. In the past, to publish 50 books and thousands of essays, you had to pass through gatekeepers. Editors, publishers, peer reviewers, they provided friction.
Right.
They forced a writer to reconcile the contradictions between their apocalyptic theology and their sales manuals. The digital landscape removes all friction.
It's just straight from the brain to the screen.
If you have the stamina, you can construct an entirely self-contained, multi-million-word digital reality that perfectly reflects your internal state, regardless of how skewed, polarizing, or contradictory it is.
So what does this all mean? When you look at this massive archive, the millions of words, the 4.8 million page views, the intense contradictions, are we looking at a legitimate, albeit highly eccentric, political philosophy?
Sure.
Or are we looking at the ultimate example of modern digital isolation? Because it really feels like a person has built an echo chamber of millions of words, creating an entire universe without ever having their ideas truly tested or refined by the outside world.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the digital era. But with 4.8 million page views, they are not shouting into an empty void. People are stumbling into this universe.
Yeah, that's a lot of eyes on these ideas.
And that is why decoding this matters so much.
Let's pull all of this together. We started by looking at a highly charged prophetic justification for why the Pope's compassion was supposedly required during a referenced 2026 Iran war.
Right.
We decoded the author's deeply controversial spiritual clarity algorithm, which attempted to redefine entire global populations as victims of a cosmic deception.
We mapped the logic, as flawed as it is.
And then we zoomed out, exploring the mind of a creator who simultaneously documents the apocalypse, artificial intelligence, and 30 ways to close a sales deal, all published at a relentless, dizzying pace.
In an era of absolute information overload, analyzing an archive like this is a masterclass in source criticism.
It really is.
We are constantly navigating digital landscapes built by individuals with profound, sometimes hidden, frameworks. Understanding how someone can weave together seemingly unconnected threads, grassroots politics, Hindu epics, biblical prophecy, and tech startups, into a coherent yet deeply skewed reality is an essential survival skill for the modern internet.
You cannot just take the surface-level political credential at face value. Just because someone was an Obama volunteer doesn't mean the rest of their blog is a standard political op-ed.
Exactly. You have to look at the structural foundation beneath the text.
Which brings us to a final thought for today. Something that builds directly on the technology the author themselves is obsessed with.
This raises an important question. We spent this entire deep dive analyzing the author's manual, Human Effort.
Right.
A human being painstakingly typed out a 20-year archive of prophecies, novels, and geopolitical doctrines. But let's return to a concept we defined earlier, agentic AI.
Right. The AI that can autonomously take actions and pursue goals. The stuff the author wrote a whole book about.
Exactly. If one human can manually generate a multi-million-word echo chamber to justify their idiosyncratic, highly polarized worldview.
Oh boy. I see where this is going.
What happens when these vast, deeply skewed digital archives are ingested by autonomous AI agents?
Wow.
What happens when an agentic AI is trained on a dataset that seamlessly blends the necessity of apocalyptic war with aggressive tech startup marketing and grassroots political organizing?
That is terrifying.
In the future, will our global conflicts be fought over physical territory and resources? Or will they be fought over whose personalized, AI-driven digital religion has the most agency to autonomously control the global narrative?
I mean, think about it.
If an AI adopts the logic of the spiritual sorting algorithm we discussed today, it isn't just publishing blog posts. It could be sending emails, moving money, and executing strategies based on a framework where the enemy cannot be reasoned with.
That completely changes the stakes. Suddenly, the murky waters of an eccentric internet blog aren't just something we are observing. They become the training data for systems that can actively make decisions in the real world.
It is the ultimate collision of ancient prophecy and future technology.
Well, on that slightly terrifying, incredibly fascinating note, we are going to wrap things up. I want to thank you so much for joining us on this intense intellectual journey. We really hope it gives you a new lens for the digital content you encounter every day.
Absolutely.
Always look for the framework beneath the text. Always question the architecture of the information you consume. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.